everyone, to the third episode of A Year of Career, 52 Practical Answers to Your Questions. I'm Erin Wolfram. I own and operate Career Advantage. I'm a career consulting business that helps folks with their job search. I help them prepare and feel more confident throughout that entire process. And you can find out more about that business at careeradvantageresumes.com or careeradvantagegolf.com. During this podcast, though, I have received questions from the public, and each week I'm going to answer one of those questions. Today, I'm lucky enough to have a special guest with me, Melissa Johnson. She works with me at Career Advantage, and she and I have been colleagues for about 15 years now, which is really hard to believe. Melissa currently works with students at the University of Kansas with career development, and I will let Melissa introduce herself to you.
Yeah, hi Erin. Thanks so much for having me. Like you said, I have been in career services in a higher education setting for about 20 years now, and just really have enjoyed working with college students with all aspects of their career development process. And I'm really excited to be joining you as a career consultant with your career consulting firm. So thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to have somebody else. So I'll go ahead and get started with this week's question, and I'll answer first. And Melissa, chime in if you'd like, and then we'll hear your perspective. So the question of the week is, what do you now know that you wish you would have known when you started your first professional job? So this takes me about 20 years back when I had my first professional job right out of college. I was a secondary English education major. So at that time, I thought I wanted to be a high school English teacher. So that was my ultimate goal out of graduation. And the nice thing is at a lot of universities, especially if you're an education major, they really set you up to succeed and to find employment, your first year out. They have career fairs and on-campus interview days and things like that that really help you learn about those teaching opportunities that are available to you that you might want to apply for. And so as the good student that I was, I participated in all of those things and made some really great connections. And most of those opportunities came about in the spring semester of my senior year. So that's when they had the on-campus interview day and things like that. And we started seeing job openings pop up around February. And so that's when we really started applying for positions. And so we're applying for positions in February. Obviously, we didn't graduate until May. So, we had about 3 to 4 months there where we could have been applying for positions and kind of weighing our options. So in March, I actually was really lucky to find several opportunities that I was interested in. I was hoping to get a teaching position in a smaller town because that's where I came from, and that seemed like a better fit for me. And I had some teachers in my family who helped me get connected with some opportunities, which was really great. And so in March, 2 to 3 months before graduation, I had, I think, about 3 different interviews set up, which was great. So I went to my very first professional interview at the age of 21 and went through the interview process. And as soon as I was done interviewing, they slid a contract across the table and said, "We want you. Here's the contract. You're hired."
Wow.
And remember, I was 21 years old. I had never had a professional interview before. I'd had jobs, part-time jobs. I worked at the bookstore. I worked in retail, but, never a professional job, and certainly not a job where there was a contract. And so I did not sign the contract right away, which is a good thing. But the mistake that I made and the lesson that I learned is within a couple of days, I did accept that offer. And I did sign that contract after I looked at it and talked it over with my family. And so the reason I say that that was a mistake and a lesson that I learned is my advice is to not just jump right ahead and take the first job that's offered to you, especially if you have some time. So I had some time, right? I still had a couple months before graduation. I still had some other interviews that I had scheduled. And so I certainly was in a place now, looking back, that I probably could have waited a bit to decide if that really was the best fit for me. But there I was, 21 years old, nervous about having a job. I needed to get paid after graduation, right? We all have to pay our bills. And so there was this opportunity sitting right in front of me. And so instead of going ahead and going through with my remaining interviews, I accepted the first job that was offered to me. So that said, the main advice that I have is to really weigh your options and think about that before you just go ahead and accept. But I did do a couple of things well. One thing is I immediately contacted all of the other school districts that I had been corresponding with about job openings. Certainly those school districts that I had other interviews lined up with, and I let them know as soon as possible that I had accepted another position. So once you accept a position, you definitely want to alert all of the organizations, companies that you've been talking to, and take yourself out, as a candidate for other options. Because once you've accepted a position, that's what you've chosen, and you need to stick with that. So communicating well with those other organizations is really important, and that is something that I did do. And I'm greatly appreciative of the fact that I did that, because actually I did something else well. Again, at the young age of 21 or 22, what happened was that first position that I accepted ended up not being a very good fit for me at all. And I knew within a couple of months that I would not be staying there another year. But of course, as a teacher, you have a contract, and you have to fulfill that contract until May, and they don't typically accept resignations until around March, of that first full year of teaching. And so, like I said, I knew it wasn't a good fit for me. I knew I wasn't going to be staying past that first year. And I also knew that I was going to be moving to Lawrence, Kansas. And one of the school districts that I had been talking to the previous year, and actually had some interviews with them and had another final interview set up with them, they are located very close to Lawrence, Kansas. And so as soon as I knew that that's where I would be moving, I reached out to that school district. And I did that in the fall. And I said, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I did some screening interviews with your school district. I was very impressed with your district and the opportunities that you had. I was very interested in working there, but unfortunately I accepted another position. I wanted to let you know that I am moving to Lawrence in May, and if you have any openings for next year, I would be very interested. And I heard back from their assistant superintendent, and she said, yes, I remember you. Thanks for checking in. We wish you well. And anyway, May came around, I moved to Lawrence, Kansas, and I decided that maybe teaching wasn't the best profession for me. And so I looked at other positions. I accepted a part-time receptionist type position in Kansas City. And one day I noticed that that school district that I'd applied to the year before, that I'd touched base with in the fall, had a job opening for a high school English teacher. And so I decided that I was going to apply, that I wanted to give teaching another shot. And I applied. I had an interview within 2 days, and I was offered that job the next day, and I took it. And one of the things that they told me is that they greatly appreciated just how I'd handled the whole process throughout the past year, how I professionally touched base with them when I'd accepted another position. I touched base with them again when I knew I was going to be moving back to the area, and continued to express my interest in their district. And then, throughout that whole process, they they remembered me. So when I came in for the interview, they really already knew who I was and knew a lot about me and knew that I really was passionate and interested and wanted to work for their district. So long story short, again, my biggest mistake was just accepting that first offer without going through the process and interviewing at more schools and just seeing what else was out there. But I did do a couple of decent things by contacting all the school districts that I've been in touch with, and then also remaining that contact with the school district that I continued to be interested in, knowing that I was going to be moving to their area in the near future. So that is my lesson. So.
I totally had the same lesson when I was a new graduate as well. I had just graduated from my master's program and was working in retail, really hated retail. So when I received that first job offer, I just jumped on it without really, taking into consideration whether it was the best fit for me. And yeah, looking back on it now, it's like, if I had to do it over again, I would have, taken more time to think about that job offer, asked for more time, and reached out to the other folks that I had been interviewing with, to see where they were at in their hiring process. And then probably ultimately not accepted that first job offer, knowing that it just wasn't the best fit for me and kind of where I was in my situation and that sort of thing. But it was definitely, it's a hard lesson to learn at a young age, not to just jump on the first thing that you're offered, because you've got student debt, oftentimes, or you're just nervous about, am I going to get any other offers? And
Right.
Just knowing yourself and just taking the time to consider those job offers, I think, is huge.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. It's scary when you're young and you just don't know what the future holds, but you know that you need money, right? We all need money to survive. So anything else, Melissa?
No, I think that was a great example, and you handled it really well. I'm impressed at your 21-year-old self, how you handled that situation.
Well, thank you. So how about you? Any other advice that you have for folks based on your experience?
Yeah, so one thing that I wish that I would have known when I started at my first job is just that know that everyone is on their own career path and their own career timeline, and try not to compare yourself to others and kind of where they're at in their own career path. I know when I first started out, I took a assistant director role and pretty much stayed in an assistant director role for the next 12 years of my career. But when I would kind of look around to my peers, I noticed, oh, wow, like other people are taking, more advanced roles. Some are taking director roles or associate director roles. Some are getting advanced degrees, pursuing their PhD or getting their law degree. And it really freaked me out a little bit. I was, kind of reassessing my own career path. Like, am I on the right path? Am I going to fall behind, whatever behind is. And so I really had to kind of reassess, where I was at. And, and after doing some soul searching, I realized, that my true passion was working directly with students, whether that was one-on-one or a group setting, teaching, whatever. And if I were to take on a more higher level administrative type position, I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to work directly with students or as much as I would in my current role. And so I think it was just, really important to understand that that wasn't my interest area, that wasn't my passion, that where I was at was truly where I should be at. And so I would just encourage, new professionals to try not to compare yourself to others and where they're at in their own process and in their career path, and to really focus on, what brings you joy and what fulfills you in your career and your career path. And then try to build upon where you're at, try to grow as a professional and build, more skills and a broader skill set. And so for me, that meant, I really enjoyed getting involved with professional associations and taking on leadership roles that way. So just really, I think, not getting so caught up with where others are at in their
Right.
career trajectory, and just focusing on what brings you joy, and just know that you're not behind, and whatever career path you're on is probably the career path you should be on, as long as it's continuing to bring you joy and fulfillment.
Absolutely. And, one thing that I heard you say was it was really based on your experiences that you had actually being, engaged within a position that made you realize what you want and what you don't want in an opportunity, right? And that parallels my experience as well. I didn't quite end the story, but I didn't last as a teacher very long. Not shocking to those of you who know me, but I only lasted 3 years. But it wasn't until I experienced that I knew that wasn't a good fit for me. And I knew what I did want and what I didn't want in a career. And so it's a whole nother podcast episode that I'm sure we'll do someday, but experiential learning is so important. Getting in there and trying out, different jobs, and really experiencing what it's like to learn what you do and don't want in a career. So I thought that was, really great that you mentioned that. And you talked about passion too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are working at least 40 hours a week, typically, often more. And believe me, I've been there. There's nothing worse than, waking up each day and just dreading going to work. And so if you are able to find your passion, that is so important. And I think that's, not only important just for, just general happiness, but mental health as well, right? Just enjoying what you do, and just wanting to, like you said, knowing that you want to help students, right? That's something that is fulfilling to you. And so figuring out what you want to do and finding your passion is really important. So
Exactly.
I think that's great.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I know I was always told, don't stay in a career longer than 5 years, or you should at least stay somewhere for 1 year. And so it's, some of that advice is good, but it's also just kind of, do a gut check and like, is this where you want to be? And if after 5 years, you're still happy and still fulfilled and still able to maybe grow in that career and take on new responsibilities, hey, it's okay to stay in that job or that position
Absolutely.
longer than 5 years. I remember being freaked out after being in a position for 5 years, thinking, is it time for me to leave now? And thinking, I really like what I'm doing, and I like, the role that I have, and how it's kind of changed and morphed into different things. And so, you are, like, your career path is your own, and your timeline is your own, and don't feel pressured to, change jobs or change paths just because someone says you should after a certain amount of time as well. So
Exactly. There aren't any hard and fast rules to career advancement, career trajectory, those sorts of things. So I love that. We're all unique. We all have our own story. We all have our own strengths, weaknesses, and skills. And so, yeah, listen to yourself, and what feels right. Melissa said earlier, I think, listen to your gut. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great advice. Talk to the people around you too. Talk to the people who know you well, your friends, your family, and get their advice too, right? I mean, you don't have to make these decisions completely on your own. You have, hopefully, this great network of people that you can tap into to, bounce ideas of, and, bounce ideas off of, and let them know how you're feeling, and, get their perspective too. And that can help you make well-informed decisions. So, well, thank you so much for your perspective, Melissa. That was fantastic. I've really enjoyed having a guest today, and hopefully this won't be the last time that we see you on A Year of Career. But thank you all, the audience, for joining both of us today. I really appreciate you listening. Again, this is the A Year of Career 52 Practical Answers to Your Questions podcast. I own and operate Career Advantage. And if you ever want to submit a question that you'd like me to answer on the podcast, you can do so at Erin at careeradvantageresumes.com. And if you need assistance with your career development and would like me or Melissa to help you, you can check us out at careeradvantageresumes.com. So again, thanks so much for joining us and hope you all have a great week.